I thought stability was something you could earn, like a credit score or a promotion. At 33, living quietly in Harbor Point, I finally felt safe. Then, on a mundane Tuesday morning, I opened my banking app to pay a simple utility bill. The familiar blue dashboard didn't load. Instead, a stark red banner flashed across my screen. Access denied. Below it, a notification stated that I had exceeded my password reset limit. Resets I had never requested. The silence in my apartment was usually my favorite part of the morning. At 33, I had finally curated a life that felt entirely my own. The coaster on the coffee table was exactly where I wanted it. The bills were paid on time. The air smelled of the roasted coffee I bought from a small shop down the street in Harbor Point. A scent that signified stability. I had spent my 20s running from the chaotic emotional weather patterns of my parents, Mark and Denise, and now, I stood on the solid ground of a boring, predictable Tuesday. I picked up my phone to pay the electric bill. It was a reflex, a muscle memory action I performed while holding a mug of coffee in my other hand. My thumb hovered over the banking app icon. I tapped it. The familiar blue loading wheel spun for a second too long. Usually, the dashboard would pop up with my checking balance, a modest but comfortable number that reassured me I was safe. Today, the screen flickered white. Then, a harsh red banner slammed across the display. Access denied. I blinked. Assuming it was a glitch, my Wi-Fi signal was strong. I tapped the retry button. The screen shifted to a secondary notification. The text bold and aggressive. Security alert. Account access has been suspended due to multiple failed password reset attempts. Please contact customer support immediately. I lowered the mug to the table, my hand trembling just enough to make the ceramic click against the wood. I had not reset my password. I had not even opened the app since Friday. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. It was the same sensation I used to get when I came home from school, to find my mother crying at the kitchen table with a pile of unopened envelopes, or my father pacing the living room with that manic, desperate energy he tried to pass off as ambition. I told myself to be rational. It was probably a system error, a hacker in a basement somewhere trying a brute force attack on thousands of accounts. I was just a statistic. I dialed the customer service number listed on the back of my debit card. The automated voice was cheery, a stark contrast to the knot tightening in my stomach. I navigated the menus, pressing 1 for English, 3 for technical support, 0 for a representative. Please hold while we access your profile. The hold music was a tinny, looped orchestral piece that grated on my nerves. I paced the length of my small living room. Finally, a human voice cut through the static. Thank you for calling Harbor Point Regional. This is Jason. Can I have your full name and the last 4 digits of your social? I gave him the information. There was the sound of typing on the other end, followed by a long, heavy silence. Jason, I asked. I am looking at the screen. Ms. Simmons, he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its customer service shine. I actually cannot proceed with this call over the phone. What do you mean? I just need to unlock my app. It says I tried to reset my password, but I did not. I understand, he said, and I could hear him choosing his words with agonizing care. Your profile has been flagged for unusual account authority activity. Due to the nature of the flag, I am required to direct you to a physical branch for identity verification. I cannot discuss details on an unsecured line. Account authority activity. That sounded like administrative speak for something far worse than a stolen debit card number. Is my money gone? I asked, my voice sharp. I cannot see your balances right now. Ms. Simmons, the profile is locked down. You need to go to a branch. I hung up and grabbed my keys. My hands were shaking properly now. I drove the 10 minutes to the main branch in downtown Harbor Point. Ignoring the speed limit signs, the city was waking up. People walking dogs and carrying gym bags, living normal lives where their financial existence had not just been deleted. The branch was cool and quiet, smelling of carpet cleaner and old money. I bypassed the teller line and went straight to the desk of a manager I recognized. A woman named Mrs. Gable, who had helped me set up my direct deposit years ago. She looked up, smiling initially, but her expression faltered when she saw my face. "Ellie," she said. "Is everything all right?" "I do not know," I said, sitting in the chair opposite her without waiting for an invitation. "My app is locked." Customer service said something about authority activity. They would not tell me anything else. Mrs. Gable frowned. She turned to her computer and typed in my name. I watched her eyes scan the screen. I saw her blink, then lean closer to the monitor. She stopped typing. She did not look at me for a long moment. When she finally turned back, her face was carefully neutral, the kind of mask people wear when they are delivering bad news in a hospital waiting room. "I need to see your driver's license, Ellie, and a secondary form of ID, if you have it." I handed her my license and a credit card. She scrutinized them as if she had not known me for 5 years, then handed them back. "There was an attempt early this morning to add a new authorized party to your profile," she said quietly. "Authorized party?" I repeated. "Like a joint account holder?" "More specific than that," she said. "The request came through a secure channel usually reserved for fiduciary management. Someone submitted paperwork claiming they had power of attorney to manage your assets. They attempted to initiate a transfer." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Who?" "The system does not show me the name of the individual, only that the request was flagged by our fraud algorithm because the transfer was linked to a trust distribution pathway." I stared at her. "A trust? I do not have a trust. Mrs. Gable? I have a checking account and a savings account with $3,000 in it." Mrs. Gable rotated the screen slightly, though not enough for me to read the text. "Ellie, the transfer attempt was not from your checking or savings. It was triggered against a custodial link connected to your Social Security number. It appears to be the Simmons Legacy Trust." The room seemed to tilt. Simmons Legacy Trust. The words felt heavy, ancient. "I do not know what that is," I whispered. Mrs. Gable looked at me with genuine pity. "It looks like a grandfathered account. It has been dormant for a long time. But the link is active. The person trying to access it had enough of your personal data to bypass the first 2 layers of security. That is why the system locked you out. It suspected a takeover. We froze it," she continued. "But you need to find out where that paperwork came from. If someone is claiming power of attorney, they are saying you are unable to manage your own affairs." I walked out of the bank into the bright morning sun, feeling exposed. Someone had tried to step into my skin. Legally speaking, someone knew about a trust I did not know existed. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down at the screen. Mom calling. The timing was impeccable. It was too precise to be a coincidence. My stomach turned over. I let it ring for a moment, staring at the picture of my mother, Denise, smiling at a beach picnic 3 years ago. She looked so normal, so maternal. I answered, "Ellie?" Her voice was breathless, high-pitched, a chirpy melody that usually preceded a request. "Dad and I were just talking about you. We realized we have not heard from you in days. How are you?" "I am fine," I lied, my voice tight. "I am just at work." "Oh, good, good. Working hard. That is my girl." There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of the television in the background, probably a morning news program. "We were just doing our own budget this morning," Denise said. "The transition's seamless. You know how everything is getting so expensive. It got us wondering if you are doing okay financially. You know, with rent and everything." The question hung in the air, coated in sugar but heavy with intent. "I am fine, Mom. Why do you ask?" "No reason. Mark, she is asking why we asked." I heard my father's rumble in the background. Then he was on the line, likely on speakerphone. "Just looking out for you, Elle," he said. His voice was warm, the voice of the fun dad who used to take me for ice cream after he lost a job. "We were reading this article about how complex banking is these days. Have you ever thought about consolidating accounts? You know, putting everything under one umbrella so it is easier to manage? We could help you look at options." The air in my car felt suddenly thin. Consolidating accounts. Putting everything under one umbrella. The phrases slotted perfectly into what Mrs. Gable had just told me. Authorized party. Power of attorney. Why would I need to do that? I asked, gripping the steering wheel. I have one bank account. It is simple. Well, you never know, Denise said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Sometimes there are things you lose track of. Old accounts. Things that could be working harder for you if family helped manage them. We just want to make sure you are not overwhelmed. I felt the old familiar manipulation under the warmth. Like a hook hidden in soft bread. They were fishing. They wanted to know if I knew. I am not overwhelmed, I said, keeping my tone flat. I have to go to a meeting. We love you. Elle, just think about it. I ended the call and sat in the parking lot, staring at the dashboard. They knew. They absolutely knew. And if they knew about a trust I had never heard of, they knew exactly how much money was in it. I needed answers. But not from them. I needed someone who knew the past better than I did. I drove to the north side of Harbor Point, to a small bungalow surrounded by overgrown hydrangeas. Maureen Voss was my grandmother's best friend. She was a retired librarian who smelled of lavender and old paper, and she was the only person in my family orbit who had never lied to me. She opened the door before I could knock, wiping her hands on a floral apron. Ellie? What a surprise. You look pale. Come inside. She made tea. Earl Grey, strong. We sat in her living room, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I told her everything. The app, the bank, the trust, the phone call from my parents. When I said Simmons Legacy Trust, Maureen set her teacup down with a sharp clink. She sighed. A long, weary sound that seemed to deflate her small frame. I told Arthur he should have told you. She said softly, my grandfather. I said, he died when I was 22. He never mentioned money. We were not rich. Maureen, he was not rich, she corrected. But he was careful, and he saw things. She looked at me, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. Do you remember the summer you were 16? The big fight? I nodded slowly. It was a vague, bruised memory, yelling in the kitchen, my father throwing a plate, my mother sobbing in the driveway. I had hidden in my room with headphones on. I thought it was about his job. I said, it was about his gambling debt. Maureen said, your father had borrowed money from people who were not banks. He wanted your grandfather to mortgage his house to pay it off. Arthur refused. That was the day Arthur decided he could not leave anything to Mark or Denise. He knew they would burn through it in a year. She leaned forward. He sold a piece of land he had inherited from his own father, way back. He put the proceeds into a trust for you. He structured it so that nobody could touch it until you were older, or until certain conditions were met. He wanted to make sure you had a safety net that your parents could not eat. But why didn't he tell me? Because he knew you have a soft heart. Ellie, he was afraid that if you knew the money was there, Mark and Denise would guilt you into giving it to them. He wanted it to stay hidden until you were settled. I sat back, the revelation settling over me like a heavy blanket. My grandfather had protected me from the grave, but the protection was failing. Someone found it, I said, and they are trying to break in. Maureen looked worried. Arthur was thorough. He would have safeguards. But if your parents are desperate, they might try things Arthur could not predict. I left Maureen's house with a name and an address. She had dug out of an old address book. Kestrel Ridge Trust Services. It was a firm in the city, specialized and private. When I got home, the mail had arrived. Sitting on top of the pile of junk mail was a thick, cream-colored envelope. The return address was embossed in navy blue ink. Kestrel Ridge Trust Services. My hands shook as I tore it open. Dear Ms. Simmons, Notice of Temporary Administrative Hold. This letter is to inform you that the Simmons Legacy Trust has been placed on a temporary administrative hold effective immediately. This action has been taken in response to a submitted incapacity concern form and a concurrent request to designate a new beneficiary contact portal, per the terms of the trust instrument. When a concern regarding the beneficiary's capacity to manage financial affairs is formally lodged, All direct access is suspended pending review by the Administrative Committee. Please refer to the attached documentation regarding the appointment of a temporary administrative delegate. I read the paragraph 3 times. Incapacity concern. They were not just trying to steal the money, they were claiming I was incompetent. They were telling a legal entity that I, Ellie Simmons, a woman who had never missed a bill, who held a steady job, who was entirely sane, was incapable of managing my own life. I dropped the letter on the counter. Panic flared, hot and bright. If they established legal incapacity, they could take control of everything, not just the trust, my life, my choices. I forced myself to breathe. 1, 2, 3. I went to my desk. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder labeled Defense. I took a photo of the banking app error screen. I took a photo of the letter from Kestrel Ridge. I wrote down the time and content of the call with Jason from customer service. I wrote down the exact time my parents called and what they said. I called Mrs. Gable back at the branch. Mrs. Gable, this is Ellie Simmons. I need the email address for your fraud department, and I need a written summary of the interaction we had this morning. I need you to document that I came in person, that I was lucid, and that I did not authorize any third party. I can do that. Ellie, she said, I will send it to you within the hour. I needed backup. I texted Tessa Lang, a friend from work who had a cynical mind and a subscription to every public record database available. Emergency. Can you run a search on me? Public records. Anything recent. Tessa called me 2 minutes later. Ellie, what is going on? Did you get arrested? No. I said, I think my parents are trying to steal my identity. Or worse. Give me a second, she said. I heard the click of her keyboard. Okay. Checking county records. Nothing criminal credit report looks. Wait. What? I asked. There is a notary entry, Tessa said slowly. Recorded 3 days ago. It is in Northgate Heights, the county over. It is an affidavit of some kind. Witnessed by a notary named Sarah Jenkins. Did you sign anything in Northgate on Saturday? I was at home on Saturday. I said, I watched movies all day. I have never been to Northgate Heights. Then someone forged your signature. Ellie. And they got a notary to stamp it. That is a felony. The pieces were locking together. The trust. The incapacity claim. The forged document. My parents were not just desperate. They were organized. They had created a paper trail to erase me. I looked at the clock. It was 6 p.m. My parents would be at home, probably eating dinner, probably telling themselves they were doing this for the family good. I opened my laptop and started a video call. I needed to see their faces. I needed to know for sure. I dialed my father's account. It rang 4 times before the screen lit up. Mark and Denise were sitting at their kitchen table. They looked surprised, but pleased. Ellie, 2 calls in 1 day. Mark beamed. To what do we owe the pleasure? I looked at them, studying the pixels on the screen. Denise had a glass of wine in her hand. Mark was wearing a polo shirt I had bought him for his birthday. They looked like parents. I got a letter today, I said, keeping my voice steady. From Kestrel Ridge Trust Services. The silence that followed was less than a second. But it screamed. Denise's smile froze. Mark's eyes darted to the left. Just a fraction, before snapping back to the camera. Kestrel Ridge? Denise asked, her voice forcing a casual tone. Is that a real estate place? Are you moving? Do not play games. Mom, I know about grandfather's trust. I know someone tried to access it this morning, and I know someone submitted paperwork claiming I am incapacitated. Mark laughed, a booming, nervous sound. Incapacitated? That is ridiculous. Ellie, who would say that? I do not know. I said, but the bank said someone with my personal data tried to redirect the funds, and Tessa found a notarized document in Northgate Heights from Saturday. I was not in Northgate on Saturday. Denise took a large sip of wine. Her hand was shaking. Ellie, honey, you sound paranoid, she said. Maybe it is a mistake. You know how banks make mistakes. It is not a mistake. I said, it is fraud. Mark leaned closer to the camera. His face hardened. The jovial dad mask slipped. revealing the desperate, cornered man underneath. "Look, Ellie, you do not understand how these things work. Trusts are complicated. Sometimes they have expiration dates. Sometimes they need management. If someone stepped in, maybe they were just trying to make sure the money did not get lost in the system. If I am the beneficiary, the trustee calls me." I said, "Unless someone tells them I cannot answer." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "The trustee will do what is best for the family. It is not just your money. Ellie, it came from your grandfather. It belongs to the Simmons name." The slip was fatal. The trustee will do what is best. He knew there was a trustee. He knew the internal logic of the situation. He had just admitted he knew the details. I stared at him. "You did it. You tried to declare me incompetent so you could take the money. We did no such thing," Denise cried, tears instantly appearing. "We love you. We would never hurt you. We are just trying to help." Mark glared at her to shut up. "Ellie, listen to me. There are things going on you do not know about. Debts that Arthur left behind." "Grandfather did not leave debts." I cut in. "You did. I reached for the mouse. Do not hang up. Ellie," Mark shouted. "We need to talk about this. If you lock that account, you are going to cause a disaster you cannot imagine." I clicked the red button. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of my apartment. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Mark had said disaster. He had said it belongs to the Simmons name. This wasn't just my parents being greedy. This wasn't a clumsy attempt to grab some cash. They had forged documents. They had a notary. They had the specific language required by a private trust firm. They had help. I looked at the Kestrel Ridge letter again. Temporary administrative delegate. They were coming for me. They were coming for the money, and they were willing to burn my life to the ground to get it. I pulled out a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date, day 1. They think I am the same scared little girl who hides in her room. I picked up my pen. They are wrong. The reception area of Price and Eddington, LLP, smelled of leather polish and intimidation. It was a boutique firm tucked away on the 3rd floor of a brick building in the historic district of Harbor Point. The kind of place that did not advertise on billboards because their clients preferred to remain invisible. I sat on a Chesterfield sofa, clutching my folder of evidence like a shield. My hands were still cold from the air outside, but my palms were sweating. A young assistant with impeccable posture called my name. She led me down a hallway lined with black and white photographs of maritime landscapes to a corner office. Nolan Price stood up as I entered. He was older than I expected, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair cropped close and a suit that looked tailored to the millimeter. He did not smile, but his handshake was firm, grounding. "Ms. Simmons," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I reviewed the summary you sent over this morning. It is an aggressive timeline." I sat down, placing my folder on his mahogany desk. "My parents called me yesterday," I said, my voice steadying. "My father admitted he knew about the trust. He said the trustee would do what was best for the family." He slipped. Nolan nodded, pulling a yellow legal pad toward him. "Slips are useful, but in my line of work, we prefer documents. Tell me exactly what happened at the bank branch." I recounted the story again. The frozen app, the unauthorized attempt to add a party, the mention of a trust distribution pathway. Nolan listened without interrupting, making small, precise notes. When I finished, he leaned back, tenting his fingers. "Trusts are designed to be fortresses. Ellie," he said, "your grandfather. Arthur Simmons. Sounds like he built a good one, but every fortress has a back door. Usually installed for maintenance." "What kind of back door?" "The incapacity clause." Nolan said, "It is standard. If the beneficiary, that is you, gets into a car accident and ends up in a coma, the trust needs a mechanism to pay your medical bills. It allows a designated representative to step in. It is meant to be a safety feature. But I am not in a coma." I said, "No." Nolan said, "You are sitting right here, but to a trustee sitting in an office 300 miles away. You are just a file number. If someone sends them a file that says you are mentally compromised, and that file looks official, they switch protocols. They stop taking orders from you, and they start looking for the designated guardian. He opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh file folder. We need to move fast. The first step is to get the actual trust instrument. Kestrel Ridge Trust Services is a legitimate firm, which is good and bad. Good because they will follow the law. Bad because they are bureaucratic and slow. If your parents have triggered an incapacity review, Kestrel Ridge is likely in a liability freeze. They will not release money to you, but they might release it to a guardian if they are convinced the emergency is real. He typed something on his computer. I am sending a demand letter right now. We are going to demand a freeze on all distributions pending identity verification. We are going to assert that you are competent, present, and objecting to any changes. But I need you to be prepared for resistance. Trustees are like large ships. They do not turn quickly. Nolan's printer, Word. He handed me a sheet of paper. Sign this. It authorizes me to represent you regarding the Simmons Legacy Trust. I signed. An hour later, Nolan had the trust document. He had called in a favor with a contact at Kestrel Ridge's legal department, bypassing the customer service firewall I had crashed into. We sat side by side, reviewing the PDF on his monitor. There it was, the Simmons Legacy Trust. The value listed in the most recent quarterly statement, which Nolan had also bullied out of them, was $480,000. I stared at the number. It was not a fortune to a billionaire, but to me, it was freedom. It was a house. It was a retirement. It was the ability to never answer a phone call from my parents again. Look at this, Nolan said, pointing to a paragraph on page 12. Distribution protocol. I read the legalese. All distributions shall be requested via the secure beneficiary portal, subject to two-factor identity verification. In the event of beneficiary incapacity, as certified by a licensed medical professional, the trustee shall accept instructions from the family representative. And who is the family representative? I asked. Nolan scrolled down. It is not a specific person. It is a definition. Any blood relative of the first degree who presents valid guardianship papers. My parents, I whispered. Exactly. Your grandfather tried to be clever by not naming them specifically, probably to avoid fighting with them while he was alive. But he left the definition open enough that they could walk through it if they could prove you were out of your mind. Nolan clicked to another document in the packet Kestrel Ridge had sent over. It was the incapacity concern form that had been submitted 2 days ago. Attached to it was a letter on letterhead from the Harbor Point Neurobehavioral Center, to whom it may concern. This letter is to certify that Ms. Ellie Simmons is currently under my care for acute manic episodes and cognitive dissociation. It is my medical opinion that she is temporarily unable to manage complex financial decisions. It was signed by a doctor, Eris Thorne. I felt a wave of nausea. I have never heard of this place. Nolan, I have never met a doctor. Thorne, I have never had a manic episode in my life. Nolan picked up his phone and dialed a number. He put it on speaker. Harbor Point Neurobehavioral Center, a pleasant voice answered. Yes, I am calling to verify the address of your clinic, Nolan said. I have a delivery for Dr. Thorne. There was a pause. I am sorry, sir. We are a remote telehealth administrative service. We do not accept physical deliveries at this number. This is an answering service. Nolan hung up. He looked at me grimly. It is a ghost clinic. Ellie, a mail drop or a virtual office. It exists only to generate paperwork. Is that legal? No, Nolan said. It is fraud. It is forgery. And using it to access a federally regulated financial instrument is a federal crime. He stood up. You need to go to the police. Right now. The police? I asked. I thought this was a civil thing. It was civil yesterday. Nolan said, now that we have a fake doctor's letter used to attempt a wire transfer, it is criminal. You need a police report number. Kestrel Ridge will not take us seriously until we show them we are treating this as a crime. If you just call and complain, you are a disgruntled customer. If you send them a police report, you are a victim of identity theft. He handed me the file. Go to the station. File the report. Do not let them turn you away. The precinct was busy, smelling of stale coffee and damp wool. I waited on a wooden bench for 40 minutes before a uniformed officer called my name. Officer Miller looked tired. He was young, but he had the weary eyes of someone who had spent too long dealing with petty disputes. He led me to a small desk and sat down, opening a digital form. "What can I do for you? Ms. Simmons? I want to report identity theft and attempted grand larceny," I said, trying to sound as authoritative as Nolan. Officer Miller typed slowly. "Okay. Did someone steal your credit card?" "No," I said. "My parents. They forged a medical document claiming I am mentally incapacitated and submitted it to a trust fund to try and drain $480,000. Officer Miller stopped typing. He looked at me, blinking. "Your parents?" he asked. "Yes, Ms. Simmons," he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, I am not saying you are lying, but disputes over family money that is usually a civil matter. If they are your parents, maybe it is just a misunderstanding. Maybe they have power of attorney you forgot about." I did not forget. I said, my voice rising slightly, "It is fraud. They made up a fake clinic." Officer Miller held up a hand. "Listen, we do not usually get involved in probate issues. If you want to sue them, you need a lawyer. We handle crimes. Unless they physically broke into your house or stole your wallet, there is not much I can do here." I felt the tears prickling behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from frustration. It was the dismissal that hurt, the assumption that because it was family, it couldn't be criminal. "I have a lawyer," I said. "He told me to come here." Officer Miller shrugged. "Lawyers always say that. They want leverage. Look, I can make a note in the system, but I cannot open a full investigation based on you saying your parents are mean to you about money." I walked out of the station shaking with rage. I called Nolan from the parking lot. He would not take the report. He said it is a civil matter. Nolan did not sound surprised. "Typical. They do not want the paperwork. Stay there. Do not leave the parking lot." 5 minutes later, my phone pinged. It was an email from Nolan's office, CCing the precinct captain and the district attorney's intake division. It was a formal complaint packet, attaching the fake doctor's letter, the trust statutes, and a citation of the penal code regarding wire fraud. "Go back inside," Nolan said. "Ask for the desk sergeant. Tell him you have additional documentation that has just been filed with the district attorney." I went back in. The atmosphere had changed. Officer Miller was talking to a gray-haired sergeant, looking at a computer screen. When they saw me, the sergeant waved me over. "Miss Simmons," the sergeant said, his voice brisk but respectful. "We just received a communication from Mr. Price. I apologize for the confusion." Officer Miller was not aware of the scope of the allegation. "We will take your statement now." They took me to an interview room. They recorded everything. They gave me a case number. I walked out feeling a strange, cold satisfaction. I had a number. It was real now. But when I got home and tried to log into the Kestrel Ridge portal, the screen was still the same. Access denied. I called Kestrel Ridge again. This time, I had the police report number. "I am sorry." "Ms. Simmons," the agent said. Her voice was robotic. "We have received your documentation. However, the account is currently under internal review. We cannot restore access until the review is complete." "How long will that take?" I asked. "There is no set timeline for incapacity reviews," she said. "We have to be thorough." It felt like stalling. Every minute I was locked out was a minute my parents could be working another angle. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Denise. "Ellie, honey, please pick up. I am so sorry about yesterday. Mark was just stressed. We just want to fix the past. We want to be a family again. Please let us explain." 2 minutes later, a text from Mark. "You are being ungrateful. We raised you. We protected you. Now you are listening to strangers instead of your own blood? You are being influenced. Ellie, wake up." I looked at the two messages side by side. Soften and scare. It was a classic interrogation tactic. Denise was the lure. Mark was the trap. They were trying to destabilize me, to make me doubt my own perception of reality. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the texts and uploaded them to the defense folder. The next morning, I was back in Nolan's office. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes and realized he had probably been working on this late into the night. Kestrel Ridge is stonewalling. Nolan said, "They are afraid of being sued. If they release the money to you and it turns out you really are incapacitated, they are liable. If they release it to your parents and it turns out to be fraud, they are liable. So they are doing nothing. They are freezing the assets. But that plays into my parents' hands." I said, "If I cannot access the portal, I cannot stop them from trying other things. We need an ally inside." Nolan said, "Customer service is useless. The legal department is defensive. We need compliance." Compliance? The people whose job it is to make sure the company does not break the law. They are usually the most hated people in a financial firm because they stop deals. But right now, we need someone who cares more about rules than profit. He turned his screen toward me. I did some digging on LinkedIn. The senior compliance officer for Kestrel Ridge is a man named Bram Keller. He has been there for 8 years. Former auditor. He posts articles about ethics in wealth management. Contact him. Nolan said, "But do not sound desperate. Sound like a whistleblower." I went home and drafted the email. I deleted it 3 times before I got the tone right. Subject: Urgent compliance matter. Simmons legacy. Trust. Potential internal procedural breach. Dear Mr. Keller, I am writing to you regarding a significant irregularity in the handling of the Simmons Legacy Trust. A fraudulent incapacity claim has been filed using forged medical documents. Despite providing a police report number, the account remains in a state that leaves it vulnerable to unauthorized access. I believe there may be a procedural failure in how the initial flag was validated. I sent it. 3 hours later, my phone rang. The number was blocked. Ms. Simmons? The voice was male, low, and guarded. Yes, this is Bram Keller. I received your email. Mr. Keller, thank you for calling. Stop, he said. I cannot discuss specific account details on this line, and you should not be emailing me directly. It triggers filters. I fell silent, feeling foolish. However, Bram continued, his voice dropping even lower. If you were to send a formal inquiry to the general compliance inbox, and if that inquiry were to specifically reference Policy Code 77B regarding third-party verification override, it would force a mandatory audit of the file. Policy Code 77B? I repeated, grabbing a pen. I did not say that, Bram said, and if anyone asks, we never spoke. But if you look at the timestamp on the incapacity claim, you might find it interesting how quickly it was processed. Usually, that takes 48 hours. This one cleared the initial check in 40 minutes. Why would it clear so fast? I asked. Bram paused. Because someone inside the system flagged it as verified trusted source. Good luck, Ms. Simmons. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. Verified trusted source. That meant someone at Kestrel Ridge had helped my parents. Or at least, someone trusted the person who submitted the paperwork. I went back to the documents Nolan had secured. I looked at the incapacity concern form again, in the bottom corner, in small print. Was the metadata of the submission. It hadn't come from a personal Gmail account. It had been faxed from a digital service. The cover sheet listed a sender. Ravelin Harbor Advisory. I typed the name into a search engine. Ravelin Harbor Advisory was a small financial planning firm in a strip mall on the outskirts of Harbor Point. It looked low rent. I searched for the firm's name alongside my father's name. Mark Simmons. Nothing in the first few results. Then, on the third page of Google results, I found a cached version of an old About Us page for Ravelin Harbor Advisory from 5 years ago. There, at the bottom of the team list, was a photo of my father, Mark Simmons, external consultant. He was smiling in the photo, wearing the same suit he wore to my college graduation. The connection snapped into place like a deadbolt. My parents hadn't just Googled how to fake a trust claim, they had a professional partner. My father had used an old business connection to submit the paperwork through a channel that Kestrel Ridge recognized as legitimate. That was why it had cleared so fast. That was why Bram Keller was worried. It wasn't just my parents. It was a conspiracy. And if Ravelin Harbor Advisory was involved, then there was a paper trail that went beyond a fake doctor's note. I forwarded the screenshot to Nolan with a single line of text. I found the pipeline. I looked out the window at the quiet street of Harbor Point. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the pavement. I realized then that my parents were not just trying to steal money. They were leveraging a lifetime of connections, every scrap of credibility they had left, to destroy me. But they had made a mistake. They had left a fingerprint. And with Bram Keller's code and Nolan's legal hammer, I was going to break their hand before they could close it around my throat. The office of Price and Eddington felt different the second time I walked in. The first time, it had been a sanctuary, a place of wood paneling and quiet authority that promised protection. Now, it felt like a war room. The air was heavy with the scent of stale coffee and printer toner. Nolan Price was standing at the window, looking out at the gray harbor, his silhouette sharp against the overcast light. He turned as I entered, his face grim. "Sit down, Ellie," he said. "We heard from our friend in compliance." "Bram Keller?" I asked, taking my usual seat. The leather felt cold through my jeans. "Indirectly," Nolan corrected. He sent a formal response to my demand letter, but he included an attachment that was not strictly necessary. It was a procedural audit log of the submission packet your parents, or rather, Ravelin Harbor Advisory, sent to Kestrel Ridge. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a dense grid of timestamps and codes. Bram flagged something specific in the margin. Nolan said, tapping a highlighted row. The paperwork package was unusually complete. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means they did not just fill out the forms," Nolan said. "They included supplementary affidavits, specific medical coding references, and a notarized waiver of conflict that most lawyers would not even know to include unless they specialized in trust law. They hit every single item on Kestrel Ridge's internal checklist, the kind of checklist you do not find on a public website." I stared at the paper. It was not just a forgery. It was a masterwork. It looks like someone had the answer key to the test before they sat down to take it. Nolan said, "This was not a desperate, spur-of-the-moment act by parents needing cash. This was engineered. Whoever assembled this knew exactly how to bypass the initial fraud filters." "Ravelin Harbor," I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "My father's old consulting gig." "Precisely," Nolan said, "and that gives us leverage. But it also means we are fighting people who know the terrain better than we do. We need to find the source of the original trust structure. We need to know what your grandfather really intended. Beyond just the money, I knew where to go." I drove back to Maureen Voss's bungalow. The sky was threatening rain, low dark clouds bruising the horizon. Maureen was waiting for me on her porch, wrapped in a knitted shawl. She did not offer tea this time. She just opened the door and led me to the back of the house, to a small sunroom that smelled of potting soil and old memories. She opened a cedar chest at the foot of a daybed and pulled out a thick, manila envelope. It was sealed with clear tape that had yellowed with age. "Arthur left this with me the week before he went into the hospital," Maureen said, her voice trembling slightly. "He told me, 'Give this to Ellie if anything feels wrong. If she ever comes to you asking questions about money or Mark and Denise.'" She handed it to me. The weight of it settled in my hands like a stone. "Why did you wait?" I asked. "Because nothing felt wrong until now." She said, "He wanted you to have a normal life, Ellie. He did not want to burden you with his paranoia unless it became your reality." I sat on the edge of the daybed and peeled back the tape. The paper inside was crisp, high-quality bond. My grandfather's handwriting was slanted, sharp, and unmistakable. "My dearest Ellie, if you are reading this, it means my fears were not unfounded. I have tried to build a wall around you, but walls have a way of crumbling when people are desperate. Do not blame yourself for what is happening. Greed makes strangers out of family. I have kept records. You will need them. Go to the Majestic Storage Center in Northgate Heights. Unit 402. The code is your birthday. Everything is there. I looked up at Maureen. My eyes were burning. Did you know about this? I knew he had a box. She said, I did not know what was in it. Arthur was a man who believed in insurance. I drove to Northgate Heights in a trance. It was a sterile industrial suburb 30 minutes north of Harbor Point. The storage center was a concrete block fortress with orange metal doors. I punched in my birthday at the keypad for Unit 402. The lock clicked open with a mechanical, heavy thud. The unit was small, smelling of dust and dry air. In the center, sitting on a metal shelf, was a single plastic banker's box. I carried it to my car and drove straight to Nolan's office. I did not want to open it alone. We cut the zip ties on the box together, inside, organized with the meticulous obsession of a man who knew he was dying. Were files, decades of files. There were copies of the original trust formation documents. There were amendments. There was a handwritten timeline of incidents, detailing every time my parents had asked him for money, every lie they had told him, every gambling debt he had refused to cover. But the file at the bottom of the stack was the one that stopped my heart. It was labeled The Loan Incident, 2014. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a loan application for $40,000 from a predatory lender. The applicant's name was Ellie Simmons. The date was from my junior year of college. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It looked like mine. A clumsy, college-aged version of my signature. I never applied for a loan. I whispered. I was on a scholarship. I worked at the campus library for spending money. Read the note attached. Nolan said gently. Paperclipped to the application was a letter from my grandfather to the lender, threatening legal action for fraud and usury, and a copy of a check my grandfather had written to the lender to kill the application fee and bury the file, and then a letter he had written to himself, a diary entry. Mark and Denise tried to co-sign using Ellie's social security number. They told me Ellie was in trouble, that she had racked up credit card debt and needed a bailout. I investigated. Ellie has zero debt. They were going to take the $40,000 for themselves and leave her with the payments. I stopped it. I did not tell Ellie. She believes she is bad with money because they tell her she is. I will not let them break her spirit. The room spun. I gripped the edge of Nolan's desk. All those years, I remembered college. I remembered my parents constantly asking if I was managing my budget, making jokes about how money burned a hole in my pocket. I remembered my mother sighing when I bought a new pair of boots, telling me I had champagne tastes on a beer budget. I had believed them. I had spent my 20s terrified of credit cards, thinking I had some genetic defect that made me irresponsible. Because they had planted that seed. They had gaslit me into believing I was incompetent while they were actively trying to steal my identity. My grandfather had saved me, and he had done it in silence to preserve my relationship with them. He had protected the illusion of a family that was already rot all the way through. I felt a sound escape my throat, a half sob, half laugh. They told me I was bad with money, I said, my voice shaking. They made me afraid to look at my own bank account. And the whole time, they were the ones trying to rob me. This changes the narrative, Nolan said, his voice hard. This proves a pattern. This is not a one-time lapse in judgment. This is a predatory history. He started sorting the documents into piles. I am filing for an emergency court order immediately. We are going to use this history to challenge the incapacity claim. We will argue that the claim is just the latest step in a decade-long scheme to defraud you. Will it stop them? I asked. It will put a legal wall up. Nolan said, we will get a hearing date. I can probably get us on the docket within 10 days. But Ellie, he looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. 10 days is a long time for people who are desperate. If they know the walls are closing in, they might escalate. You need to be careful. I left the office with copies of the files. The originals stayed in Nolan's safe. I needed to see the lie with my own eyes. I needed to see the place that had declared me insane. I drove to the address listed on the letterhead of the Harbor Point Neurobehavioral Center. It was on the edge of town, in a strip mall that had seen better days. There was a vape shop, a discount liquor store, and a place called Pack Ship Express. The address on the letter was Suite B. I walked into the Pack Ship Express. It was a narrow room lined with hundreds of small metal mailboxes. "Excuse me," I said to the teenager behind the counter who was scrolling on his phone. "Is there a Suite B here?" He pointed to the wall of boxes. "We are Suite B. Lady, the boxes are just numbered." I looked at the wall. Box number 104 had a piece of tape on it. P. Neuro. I felt sick. A doctor's office in a mailbox. A medical diagnosis that could strip me of my rights. Birthed in a dusty shipping store next to a liquor shop. Someone had come here, rented this box, printed that letterhead, and built a fake reality to trap me. I walked out to my car and sat there, watching the rain start to streak the windshield. I felt hollowed out. The grief for my grandfather was mixing with a cold. Sharp rage toward my parents. They had not just betrayed me. They had underestimated me. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would believe the lie. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Ellie, please, we need to talk. Not on the phone. Come to dinner tonight. Just us. We want to explain everything. We promise. No fighting. Just listen to us. Please. 7 p.m. My thumb hovered over the delete button. Nolan had told me to be careful. He had told me to stay away. But I looked at the file on the passenger seat. The timeline of lies. If I wanted to win this, I needed more than just documents. I needed to know why. I needed to know what they were so afraid of that they would do this to their own daughter. I texted back, "I will be there." I went home and changed clothes. I put on a blazer, something structured, like armor. I put my phone in my inside pocket and set the voice memo app to a shortcut on the lock screen. I knew I couldn't legally record them without consent in this state, but I could record my own recollections immediately after. I could take notes. I could be a spy in my own childhood home. The drive to Briar Glen was autopilot. It was the neighborhood where I grew up. A subdivision of winding streets and manicured lawns that hid the mortgages eating away at the residents. My parents' house was a 2-story colonial with white siding that needed power washing. My father's car was in the driveway. A leasing sticker was in the window. I walked up the path. The porch light was off. Denise opened the door before I could ring the bell. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her face drawn, makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the stress lines. "Ellie," she breathed, reaching out to hug me. I stepped back. "I am not here for hugs. Mom, I am here to listen. You said you wanted to explain." She flinched, her hands dropping to her sides. "Right, come in. Mark is in the dining room." The house smelled the same. Vanilla candles and lemon pledge, masking the scent of old carpet. We walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china. The plates with the gold rim we only used for Thanksgiving. There was a roast chicken in the center. It looked like a parody of a family dinner. Mark was sitting at the head of the table. He stood up when I entered, pouring a glass of red wine. "Ellie, glad you came. Sit. Drink? No. Thank you," I said. Taking the chair closest to the door, we sat in silence for a moment. Mark carved the chicken. The knife scraped against the platter, a harsh screeching sound. "So," Mark said, serving himself a large portion. "You have a lawyer, a fancy one. Price in Eddington. That must be expensive." "He is thorough," I said. Mark chewed slowly. "You know, lawyers complicate things. They turn family matters into legal battles. They drain the money until there is nothing left for anyone. There would be no battle if you had not tried to steal my trust fund." I said calmly. Mark put his fork down. "We did not try to steal it." "Ellie, we tried to access it. There is a difference." "Is there?" I asked. "Forging a medical letter? Claiming I'm crazy? That feels like stealing." "It was a maneuver," Mark snapped, his face flushing. "A necessary maneuver. You do not understand the pressure we are under. You sit in your little apartment with your steady paycheck and you judge us. You have no idea what it takes to maintain a life in this world." "Then tell me," I said, "what is the pressure? Why do you need $480,000 so badly that you would commit a felony? Denise made a small, whimpering sound. Mark, please. Mark ignored her. He leaned forward, his eyes bloodshot. It is not just debt. Ellie. It is not just credit cards. We made some investments, private partnerships. We thought they were sure things. Hollowbrook Capital. I memorized the name instantly. Hollowbrook Capital. And? I pushed, and the liquidity dried up. Mark said, the market turned. But these are not the kind of people who send you a late notice in the mail. They have terms. They have deadlines. He looked at his watch. A nervous tick I had never seen before. We have a deadline coming up. Ellie, a hard deadline. If we do not make a payment, they call the note. And if they call the note, we lose the house. We lose the cars. We lose everything. Is that all? I asked. You lose the house? You can rent an apartment. Mark laughed. A dry, humorless bark. You think it stops at the house? These people. They have reach. They have associates. People have been calling the house line. Ellie, hanging up, sitting in cars down the street. He lowered his voice. We owe money to a group that does not negotiate. We needed the trust to bridge the gap. Just for a few months. We were going to pay it back. I looked at him, and I realized he believed it. He actually believed he could steal $500,000, pay off a loan shark, and then somehow magically replace the money before I noticed. It was the delusion of a gambler who thinks the next hand will fix everything. You were never going to pay it back, I said quietly. You were going to drain it dry, just like you tried to do with the loan when I was in college. Mark froze. Denise covered her mouth with her hand. You know about that? Denise whispered. I know everything. I said, I have grandfather's box. I have the files. I know you tried to use my name to get $40,000. I know grandfather paid them off to save me. Mark's face went from red to gray. The defiance drained out of him, leaving just fear. Arthur kept that? He muttered. The old bastard. He kept it. He kept it to protect me from you, I said, and he was right. I stood up. I have heard enough. You are not just bad with money. Dad, you are dangerous, and I'm not going to let you drag me down with you. Ellie, wait, Denise cried, grabbing my arm. You cannot just leave. If we do not get that money, something bad is going to happen. Please, you are the only one who can help us. You can sign a release. You can tell the bank it was a misunderstanding and let you take the money, I asked, looking at her hand on my sleeve. Just half, Mark shouted. Just give us half. We can make it work with half. I pulled my arm away. No, not a cent. I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard Mark throw his wine glass. It shattered against the wall, a spray of red seeking the white paint. You are killing us, he screamed. You are killing your own parents. I walked out into the cool night air. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to grip the steering wheel for a full minute before I could start the engine. I drove 2 blocks away and pulled over. I opened the voice memo app. Time, 8:15 p.m. Location, Briar Glen. Mark and Denise Simmons. Mark admitted to debts with Hollowbrook Capital. Mentioned a hard deadline. Mentioned people watching the house. Mentioned that the creditors do not negotiate. He admitted the trust money was intended to pay this debt. He asked me to sign a release to give them half. I refused. I saved the file. The drive home was a blur of headlights and rain. I felt like I had just walked through a minefield. My parents were involved with loan sharks. They were terrified, and a terrified animal is the most dangerous thing in the world. When I got to my apartment, I double-locked the door. I checked the windows. The safety I had felt yesterday was gone. I sat down at my laptop to email Nolan the update. My inbox had one new message. It was from a sender I did not recognize. Watcher 88. The subject line was blank. I opened it. Tell your lawyer to stop. You will lose more than money. There was no signature, no attachment, just those 10 words. I stared at the screen. The fear that had been simmering in my gut boiled over. This wasn't Mark. Mark texted in choppy sentences and called to yell. This was cold. this was calm. You will lose more than money. It was a physical threat. They knew I had a lawyer. They knew I was fighting back. I did not collapse. I did not cry. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. This was what my grandfather had been preparing me for. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me the truth. I forwarded the email to Nolan, received this just now. After leaving my parents' house, Mark mentioned people were calling him. I think this is them. Nolan replied within 2 minutes. Do not reply. Do not delete. Screenshot it. Print it. I am adding this to the emergency motion. We are escalating this to the judge first thing in the morning. Ellie, lock your doors. Change your Wi-Fi password. Enable 2-factor authentication on everything. Do not go out tonight. I closed the laptop. I went to the kitchen and checked the lock on the back door. I wedged a chair under the handle. I turned off the lights in the apartment, leaving only the glow of the street lamp outside filtering through the blinds. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, clutching the folder with my grandfather's letters. My parents were drowning, and they had tried to use me as a life raft. But I wasn't going to float. I was going to be the rock that sank their ship before it could pull me under. I looked at the phone in my hand. Day 3. The war has started. The office of Price and Eddington had become my second home, a sanctuary of mahogany and dust motes where the battles for my future were being drafted on yellow legal pads. I sat across from Nolan Price, watching him read a clause in the trust document for the 10th time. He had his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, and his frown had deepened into a canyon. There is a problem, Ellie, he said. Looking up, a structural vulnerability I missed on the first pass. My stomach tightened. I thought we froze it. I thought the demand letter stopped them. It stopped the immediate transfer, Nolan said, but it triggered a secondary clock. Look here. Article 9, Section C. He turned the document toward me. I read the dense legal text, my eyes skimming over words like fiduciary, contingent, and statutory. In the event that the primary beneficiary fails to complete identity verification within 30 days of a flagged security event, the trustee reserves the right to appoint a temporary administrative delegate from the pre-approved list to ensure the continued management of trust assets. I looked at Nolan. What does that mean in English? It means if you stay locked out for 30 days, Kestrel Ridge can pick someone else to drive the car. Nolan said, they call it an administrative delegate. It is supposed to be a failsafe so the account does not sit in limbo forever, but here's the catch. Kestrel Ridge usually picks a delegate based on recommendations from the initial filing party if the beneficiary is unreachable. The initial filing party. I said, that is my parents, or Ravelin Harbor Advisory. Exactly. Nolan said, they are not trying to break the door down anymore. They are waiting for the timer to run out. If we cannot force Kestrel Ridge to verify you, and they are refusing to do so because of the incapacity claim, then the system defaults to this clause. They just have to keep you locked out until the deadline passes. Then, they get appointed as delegates legally. And once they are delegates, I asked, they can approve distributions. Nolan said, they can pay bills. Like, say, a debt to a private equity firm called Hollowbrook Capital. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The stalling from Kestrel Ridge wasn't incompetence, it was part of the mechanism. My parents were running out the clock. I need to talk to Bram Keller. I said, you cannot talk to him. Nolan warned. He is a compliance officer. If he is caught back-channeling with a client, he loses his license. I will send another email. I said, a policy inquiry. I will use the code he gave me. I went back to my apartment. It felt less like a home and more like a bunker. I sat at my desk and crafted an email to the general compliance inbox, careful to use the dry, bureaucratic language Bram had responded to before. Reference: policy inquiry regarding statutory hold duration and override protocols. Is there a mechanism to pause the Article 9 countdown in cases of contested identity theft? I hit send. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was a restricted number. Ms. Simmons, the voice said. It was Bram. He sounded rushed, his voice low. surrounded by the hum of server fans or air conditioning. "Mr. Keller," I said, "thank you for—" "Do not thank me," he interrupted. "Listen, I cannot answer your question about the countdown because the countdown is automated, but I can tell you why the hold is holding." "Why?" I asked. "Because someone keeps resetting the verification flag," Bram said, "every time the fraud department clears the initial alert. A manual override comes in. It is pushing the file back into the requires review queue." "Who is doing it?" I asked. "Is it someone in your office?" "No," Bram said. "It is coming from a satellite office, a regional branch. I cannot see the user ID. But the authorization code is high level. Senior manager or above." He paused. "Ms. Simmons, this is not just an external attack. Someone inside Kestrel Ridge, or someone with deep access to our systems, is helping your parents. They are manually keeping the door shut so the clock runs out. I am trying to trace the IP address of the override, but they are routing it through a VPN. Can you stop them?" "I can try to flag the override as suspicious," Bram said, "but that takes time. And you do not have time. The system shows the verification window closing sooner than you think." "How soon?" He hesitated. "I shouldn't tell you this, but the system is set to default to the administrative delegate clause in 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. 3 days until I lost control. 3 days until my parents, or their handler at Ravelin Harbor, stepped in and wired $480,000 to pay off a loan shark. Panic flared, hot and white, but I shoved it down. Panic was what they wanted. Panic was incapacity. I needed to be the opposite of incapacitated. I needed to be a machine. I spent the next 6 hours rebuilding my life into a fortress. I went to an electronics store and bought 3 hardware security keys, YubiKeys. I came home and wiped my laptop. I reinstalled the operating system. I changed every password I owned, email, bank, social media, utilities, to random strings of 20 characters that I wrote down in a physical notebook. I set up the hardware keys so that no one, not even me, could log in without physically plugging in the USB stick. I called the credit bureaus. I didn't just place a fraud alert. I froze everything. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. I locked my credit files so tight that I couldn't have bought a toaster on an installment plan if I wanted to. Then I started printing. I printed every email from Nolan, every screenshot of the banking app, every text message from my parents, the metadata from the fake doctor's letter, the photo of my father's consultant profile. I bought a 3-ring binder and organized it all by date. Using plastic dividers, I created a paper brain. If they hacked my cloud, if they stole my laptop, if they burned my apartment down, I would have this binder. My trauma didn't look like weeping on the floor. It looked like hypercompetence fueled by fear. It looked like a woman who was methodically closing every window and bolting every door because she knew the wolves were not just at the door, they had keys. That night, I opened the archive box from Northgate Heights again. I needed to find the connection. Bram said the override was coming from a satellite office. Ravelin Harbor was a small shop. But maybe they had friends. I dug through the files my grandfather had left. I found a folder labeled Ravelin Investigation, 2018. I opened it. Inside was a memo my grandfather had written to himself, typed on his old typewriter. Met with Jim Ravelin today regarding Mark's suggestion to move the trust assets to his firm. Impression: aggressive fee harvesting. They push proprietary funds with high expense ratios. The advisory fee is layered on top of the fund fees. It is a skimming operation wrapped in a suit. Mark seems enamored with him. I suspect Mark gets a kickback for referrals. I have instructed the trustee never to engage with Ravelin Harbor Advisory. My grandfather had seen them coming 8 years ago. He had blocked them. And now, with him gone, they were back. I looked at the address of Ravelin Harbor Advisory on the memo. It was in a corporate park off the highway. About 20 minutes from downtown. I needed to see it. I needed to know who I was fighting. The next morning, I put on my best suit. I pulled my hair back into a severe bun. I put on glasses I didn't need. but which made me look serious. I grabbed a leather portfolio. I drove to the corporate park. Ravelin Harbor Advisory was in a single-story brick building that looked respectable on the outside, but felt cheap as soon as I walked in. The carpet was thin. The reception desk was made of laminate that was peeling at the corners. A young woman looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" I smiled. A tight, professional smile. "Hi, I am looking for a financial advisor. I am new to the area. A friend mentioned this firm. Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No, I was just passing by. Is there anyone available for a quick consultation?" She looked at a calendar. "Let me check if Mr. Ravelin is free. He usually takes walk-ins if they have significant portfolios. I have a significant portfolio." I lied smoothly. She picked up the phone. While she whispered into the receiver, I looked around the waiting area. The walls were covered in framed certificates and photos. Standard generic art of lighthouses and compasses. But on the wall behind the coffee station, there was a collage of photos from company events. I stood up and walked over. Pretending to examine the coffee machine, I scanned the photos, golf tournaments, Christmas parties, ribbon cuttings, and there, in the bottom right corner, was a photo from a charity gala, 2022. Two men were standing with their arms around each other, holding scotch glasses, laughing. One was a heavy-set man with a red face, presumably Jim Ravelin. The other was my father. Mark didn't look like a consultant in the photo. He looked like a brother. He looked like a partner. They were thick as thieves. This wasn't a professional relationship. This was personal. My father wasn't just using Ravelin to submit paperwork. He was friends with the architect of the scheme. The receptionist hung up. "Mr. Ravelin can see you for 10 minutes. I turned around. "Actually, I just realized I left my phone in the car. Let me grab it." I walked out the door and didn't look back. I had seen enough. I had the confirmation. My father and Jim Ravelin were close enough to conspire on a felony. I was driving back to the city when my phone rang through the car speakers. "Mom." I debated ignoring it, but the strategist in me, the part of me that was building the binder, knew that every conversation was evidence. I answered, "Ellie?" Her voice was wet, thick with tears. "Ellie, please do not hang up. I am here." I said, "Mark is losing it." Denise sobbed. "He is pacing the house. He has not slept. He keeps saying it is almost over. But he looks terrified. What do you want me to do?" "Mom?" I asked cold. "I want you to help us survive." She whispered. "Survive?" I asked. "Is someone going to kill you?" She went silent. The silence was heavy, terrified. "Mom," I said, "who is threatening you? Is it Hollowbrook?" She took a jagged breath. "It is complicated. Mark made promises. He told them he had access to capital. He used the trust as collateral." "Collateral?" I shouted, nearly swerving into the next lane. "He pledged my trust fund as collateral for a loan he hadn't even secured yet? He thought he could get access." Denise cried. "He thought it would be easy. He just needed to show them the account balance to get the extension. But now the deadline is Friday. If he does not show them the money—" She dissolved into weeping. "Ellie, if you just sign a waiver, just a temporary waiver, we can show them the funds are available. We do not even have to spend it. Just show them, then they will back off. You are asking me to be an accomplice to fraud." I said, "You want me to lie to a creditor so Dad doesn't get his legs broken. I want my husband to be safe." She screamed, "I want this to stop. I will tell the truth. Ellie, I will tell everyone it was my idea to sign the incapacity papers. I will take the blame. Just help us survive this week." I listened to her begging. I felt a twist of pity, sharp and painful, but it was drowned out by the realization of what she was actually saying. She was willing to go to jail for him. She was willing to destroy me for him. She was a victim of his gambling and his lies. Yes, but she was also his enabler. She was the getaway driver begging the pedestrian she just hit to help her hide the body. "I cannot do that. Mom," I said, "I cannot sign anything." "Then you are letting him die," she whispered. "No," I said, "he did this to himself, and you helped him." I hung up. My hands were gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I went straight to Nolan's office. I told him about the photo. I told him about the call. Collateral, Nolan said, leaning back in his chair. That explains the urgency. He pledged the trust assets. That is fraud on top of fraud. He sold something he didn't own. He looked at the calendar on his wall. We have the hearing on Monday, Nolan said. But if Bram is right, and the administrative clock runs out in 72 hours, that is Friday, the hearing will be too late. We need to stop the clock. I said. Nolan nodded. We need a temporary restraining order, a TRO. We need a judge to order Kestrel Ridge to freeze the administrative countdown immediately. He started typing furiously. I am going to file an emergency motion ex parte. That means we ask the judge to rule without waiting for the other side to respond, because the harm is imminent and irreparable. He looked at me. You need to be ready. If the judge grants a hearing before the TRO, you might have to testify. Can you handle that? I can handle it. I said, okay, let's practice. Nolan stood up and paced the room. I want you to describe the moment you saw the access denied screen. But Ellie, listen to me. Do not be angry. Do not be the hysterical daughter. Be the calm, rational beneficiary who is concerned about procedural adherence. The judge does not care about your family drama. He cares about the contract. I took a breath. I opened the app to pay a utility bill. I said, keeping my voice level, the screen flashed a denial message. It stated that password reset limits had been exceeded. I had not initiated any resets. Good, Nolan said. And the emotional impact? I felt confused. I said, and then concerned. I immediately documented the error and contacted the institution. Perfect, Nolan said. You are not a victim. You are a diligent record keeper. That is how we win. We spent the next 2 hours going over every detail. The police report, the text messages, the fake clinic. Then, at 4 p.m, my phone pinged. It was an email notification from Kestrel Ridge. Subject: urgent. Verification window, expiration warning. Dear beneficiary, this is a final notice. The identity verification window regarding the recent security flag on the Simmons Legacy Trust will expire in 72 hours. Failure to complete verification in person or via the secure portal will result in the automatic activation of the temporary administrative delegate protocol as per Article 9. Please contact your case manager immediately. It was real. The clock was visible now. 72 hours meant Friday at 4 p.m. Nolan looked at the email. They are pushing it, he said. This notice? It is automated, but the timing is aggressive. Usually, they give a week's warning. Someone manually triggered this final countdown. He grabbed his coat. I am going to the courthouse. I am going to find a judge. I am going to file this motion before the clerk's office closes. What do I do? I asked. You wait, Nolan said, and pray we get a judge who hates banks. I waited in his office. The sun went down. The cleaning crew came and went, vacuuming the hallway. I sat in the dark, watching the lights of the harbor twinkle below. I felt small. I felt like I was 12 years old again, listening to my parents fight through the wall, waiting for the crash of something breaking. At 7:30 p.m., Nolan walked back in. He looked exhausted. His tie loosened, but he was holding a piece of paper. We got it? I asked, standing up. We got it, he said, exhaling a long breath. Judge Holloway. She granted the TRO. It orders Kestrel Ridge to suspend all administrative changes, freeze the countdown, and forbids any distribution until the hearing on Monday. Thank God, I whispered. Do not celebrate yet, Nolan said. A TRO is just a piece of paper until it is served. We have to serve Kestrel Ridge's legal department, and we have to serve the adverse parties. My parents, I said, and Ravelin Harbor, Nolan added, and because Kestrel Ridge is a corporate entity, we have to serve their registered agent. If we do not get proof of service filed by the deadline, the order is void. When is the deadline? Tomorrow at noon, Nolan said. We have to serve everyone by noon tomorrow, or the Friday deadline stands. I looked at him. My parents are in Briar Glen. Ravelin is on the highway. Kestrel Ridge is downtown. I have a process server for Kestrel Ridge, Nolan said, but he is booked solid for the morning. He can get to the bank, but he cannot get to the suburbs in time. I will do it, I said. Nolan shook his head. You cannot serve your own parents. Ellie, it is a conflict. You need a neutral third party. I thought about it. I needed someone I trusted, someone who wasn't afraid of Mark Simmons, someone who knew the stakes. Maureen. I said, Maureen Voss? Nolan asked. She is 80 years old. She is a retired librarian. I said, she walks 3 miles a day, and she hates my father. She can serve the papers in Briar Glen. Nolan hesitated, then nodded. Is she willing? I will ask her. I called Maureen. I explained the situation. I told her about the clock, the 72 hours, the loan sharks, the judge's order. Honey, Maureen said, her voice steel, bring me the papers. I have been wanting to hand your father a piece of my mind for 20 years. A court order will do just nicely. I drove to Maureen's house at 10 o'clock at night. I gave her the thick envelope for my parents. Be careful. Maureen. I said, Mark is unstable. I am not afraid of Mark, she said, patting my hand. He is a bully. Bullies crumble when you stand up to them. I drove home. I had the TRO for Ravelin Harbor in my passenger seat. I would hire a private courier for that one first thing in the morning. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The red light of the smoke detector blinked overhead. 72 hours. My parents were desperate. They had promised money they didn't have to people who broke legs for a living, and now I was the only thing standing between them and the cash. When the sun came up, I wasn't just going to be fighting a legal battle, I was going to be cutting the wire on their bomb, and I knew, with a sick certainty, that when the timer stopped, the explosion would not be contained. It would blow the family apart forever. I closed my eyes, let it burn. I thought, let it all burn. I am fireproof now. The morning of the deadline, the air in Harbor Point felt heavy, charged with the static of an approaching storm. I sat in the passenger seat of my car outside the post office, watching the minute hand on the dashboard clock tick toward noon. I had done my part. The private courier I had hired to serve Ravelin Harbor Advisory had texted me a photo of the signature of receipt at 10 in the morning. Now, I was waiting for Maureen. My phone buzzed. It was a picture message. The photo showed a manila envelope lying on the doormat of my parents' house in Briar Glen. In the background, I could see my father's shoes, loafers, scuffed at the toe, standing in the open doorway. Then a text from Maureen. Delivered. He did not look happy. I told him to have a nice day. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 24 hours. Service was complete. The temporary restraining order was active. We had stopped the clock. I drove to Nolan's office. The mood should have been celebratory, but when I walked in, Nolan was on the phone, his back to me, his voice sharp and angry. That is not acceptable. He was saying, a court order is not a suggestion. I want the audit logs for that queue preserved immediately. If a single byte of data is deleted, I will move for sanctions that will make your head spin. He hung up and turned to me. His face was flushed. We have a problem, he said. What happened? I asked. Did the judge rescind the order? No, the order stands, Nolan said. But we just got a response from Kestrel Ridge's legal team regarding the service. The satellite office, the one where the override came from, is claiming they never received your initial fraud alerts. They are claiming the system showed clean sailing until today. That is a lie. I said, I have the confirmation emails. I have the reference numbers. I know it is a lie. Nolan said. And so does Bram Keller. He gestured to his computer screen. Bram called me 10 minutes ago on a burner line. He dug into the metadata of those fraud alerts. They were not lost. They were not ignored. They were routed. Routed where? To a special handling queue. Nolan said, it is an internal designation used for high net worth clients who require discretion. Usually, it is for politicians or celebrities who do not want their frozen accounts showing up on a general report when your fraud alert hit the system. Someone manually tagged your file as special handling. That diverted the alert away from the standard fraud department and sent it directly to a specific desk. So the general fraud team never saw it. I said, realizing the brilliance of the move. Exactly. The satellite office can truthfully say they did not see a standard alert because the alert was sitting in a VIP inbox that only one person could access. Who? I asked. Bram is still looking. Nolan said, but whoever it is, they are working in concert with Ravelin Harbor. This is a pipeline. Ellie, your parents submit the fake paperwork. Ravelin validates it, and someone inside Kestrel Ridge catches the alarm bells and silences them before they can ring. I felt a cold shiver. It was not just stalling, it was air traffic control. They were guiding the money out of my account and clearing the runway. We have the logs now, Nolan said, picking up a stack of papers. Since we serve the TRO, Kestrel Ridge's main compliance office in the city, Panic dumped a bunch of data to show they are cooperating. They are terrified of liability. Look at this. He handed me a sheet. It was a transaction attempt log. Date: January 26, 2026. Amount: $480,000. Destination: routing number 021. The destination account. Nolan said, it is not your parents' checking account. It is not even Ravelin Harbor. I looked at the beneficiary name on the transfer request. Hollowbrook Capital Partners. Fund 4LP. Hollowbrook, I whispered. Mark told me that name. He said they owed money to a private partnership. It gets worse, Nolan said. I ran a search on Hollowbrook Capital Partners. They are a legitimate private equity firm on paper. Based in Delaware. But Fund 4? It is a distressed asset vehicle. They buy bad debt. They buy high-risk loans. And they operate behind layers of shell entities. He leaned forward. Your parents did not just want the money to put in a savings account. Ellie, this was a direct wire to pay off a creditor. The transfer instruction was set up so that the moment the trust released the funds, they would bounce instantly to Hollowbrook, so my parents would never even touch the money. I said, no, Nolan said. They are just the conduit. This confirms what your father said about the deadline. Hollowbrook is waiting for payment, and if they do not get it, they call the note. I finished. Or worse, this changes the motive. Nolan said, it is not just greed, it is survival. Your parents are likely facing financial ruin or legal action from Hollowbrook. That makes them desperate. And desperate people do not stop because of a restraining order. I need to talk to them. I said, Ellie, no, Nolan warned. You served them papers. You are adverse parties. I need to look them in the eye. I said, I need to know one thing. If I know this, I know how to fight them in court on Monday. What do you need to know? I need to know who gave them the playbook. I texted my mother, meet me at the Daily Grind in Lakewood Crossing. 1 hour. If Mark wants to come, he can come. But if you do not show up, I am asking my lawyer to file for criminal charges against you personally for the affidavit. It was a bluff, mostly, but it worked. Lakewood Crossing was a neutral ground, a busy outdoor mall halfway between the city and the suburbs. The Daily Grind was crowded with teenagers and shoppers. It was public. It was safe. I sat at a corner table, my back to the wall. I watched them walk in. They looked 10 years older than they had a week ago. Mark was wearing sunglasses, even though it was overcast. Denise was clutching her purse like a life preserver. They spotted me and hesitated, then walked over. They sat down. Mark did not take off his sunglasses. You served us, Mark said, his voice low and raspy. A sheriff came to the door. It was a process server. I said, and yes, I told you I would stop you. We are your parents, Denise whispered, tears already welling up. How can you drag us into court? You dragged me into a fake clinic in a mailbox. I said, you dragged me into a felony fraud scheme. Do not talk to me about family. I looked at Mark. I have one question. If you answer it honestly, I will consider asking the judge for leniency on the criminal referral. If you lie, I will let the district attorney shred you. Mark scoffed. Looking away, you are bluffing. Try me, I said. I know about Hollowbrook. I saw the transfer logs. I know the money was going straight to them. Mark went still. His jaw tightened. Here's the question, I said. Who told you that the verification window mattered? Mark frowned. What? The 72-hour window? I said. The deadline? Who told you that if I was locked out for 30 days, the trust would default to an administrative delegate? Who told you that specific rule existed? Mark stayed silent. He picked up a sugar packet and started tearing the corner. Tiny white crystals spilling onto the table. Because you did not find that in the trust document. I continued. That clause is buried in legalese that even my lawyer missed the first time. You did not read that. Someone told you exactly how to time the incapacity claim so it would trigger the countdown. Who was it? Mark's eyes flicked up to mine, then away. He didn't answer. Was it Jim Ravelin? I asked. Mark flinched at the name. He is just a consultant. Mark muttered. He is your handler. I said, he built this for you, didn't he? He told you exactly what forms to sign, where to send them, and when to send them, and he promised you he had a friend inside Kestrel Ridge who would catch the ball. Mark slammed his hand on the table. The sugar packet exploded, white dust flying. He said it was standard procedure. Mark hissed. He said it was a loophole. He said nobody would get hurt because the trust was just sitting there doing nothing. So Ravelin told you. I said, he said he could help us fix the Hollowbrook mess. Mark said, his voice cracking. He said he knew a way to unlock the capital. We just had to follow the steps. And the affidavit? I turned to Denise. The caregiver affidavit. Did Jim Ravelin give you that too? Denise looked down at her hands. She was trembling. He gave me a stack of papers. She whispered, he said it was for health insurance. Health insurance? I repeated, incredulous. He said that if we were going to manage the trust, we needed to show we were responsible for your well-being, Denise said, her voice rushing out. He said it was just a formality, a caregiver form. I thought it was like when you list an emergency contact. Mom, I said, leaning in. That form claimed I was mentally incompetent. It claimed you were my legal guardian because I had lost my mind. Did you read it? I skimmed it. She stammered. It was so much legal language. Jim said it was fine. He said, just sign here, here, and here. And my signature? I asked. The signature on the bottom that looks like mine. Did Jim sign that? Or did you? Denise went pale. I did not sign your name. Ellie, I swear, I would never do that. Then how did it get there? I do not know, she cried. I signed my part, and I gave the papers back to Jim. Maybe he did it? I looked at them. They were pathetic. They were malicious, yes, but they were also incredibly stupid. They had handed their lives over to a man who had used them as pawns to raid a trust fund. Ravelin was probably taking a massive cut of the $480,000 before sending the rest to Hollowbrook. You are going to lose, I said, on Monday. I am going to show the judge everything. The logs, the fake clinic, the connection to Ravelin. And Ravelin is not going to protect you. He is going to claim you acted alone. Mark took off his sunglasses. His eyes were red-rimmed and terrified. Ellie, he said, his voice shaking, if we do not pay Hollowbrook by Friday, Jim says they are going to foreclose. Not on the house, on the debt. They are going to sue us for fraud. Jim says they will put us in jail. You are already facing jail. Dad, I said, you just have to decide which cell you want. The one Hollowbrook puts you in, or the one I put you in. I stood up. Tell the truth on Monday. I said, that is your only way out. I walked away. I didn't look back. I felt a sick mixture of vindication and sorrow. They were my parents, and I had just dismantled them. I went back to Nolan's office. I felt heavy, drained. We have the confirmation. I told Nolan, Ravelin orchestrated it. Denise claims she signed the affidavit without reading it. She denies forging my signature, which implies Ravelin did it after she handed the papers back. That fits, Nolan said. Ravelin is the architect. Your parents are the useful idiots. He looked at me. How are you holding up? I am tired. I said, I just want this to be over. I want my money safe. And I want them out of my life. Nolan nodded. He opened a file on his desk. About keeping the money safe, he said. I found something else. While we were digging through the amendments in your grandfather's box, I found a provision we haven't discussed. It is called the protective trustee transfer. What is that? It is a poison pill, Nolan said. Your grandfather anticipated exactly this scenario. He wrote a clause that says, if any party attempts to remove the primary beneficiary's control through proven acts of fraud or duress, the trust shall immediately transfer its domicile to a designated independent fiduciary. That sounds good. I said, it moves the trust away from Kestrel Ridge, away from the people who are compromised. It is good, Nolan said. But there is a catch. The clause also says, to ensure the ongoing protection of the assets from the fraudulent parties, the independent fiduciary shall implement a distribution restriction period of no less than 2 years, during which the beneficiary may only receive funds for verified health, education, and maintenance expenses. All discretionary distributions shall be suspended. I stared at him. So if I use this clause, I lock myself out? I asked. You lock everyone out, Nolan said, including yourself. You get a new trustee, a safe one, like a firm called Cedar Vale Fiduciary, which is named in the document. They will protect the money with an iron fist, but you cannot just call them up and ask for $10,000 for a vacation or a car. You have to submit receipts. You have to prove you need it for rent or bills, for 2 years. I sank back into the chair. It was a choice between autonomy and security. If I fought the incapacity claim and won without the poison pill, I would get full control of the $480,000 immediately. I could take it all out. I could move to Europe, but I would be staying with Kestrel Ridge for now, or fighting a long battle to move the funds manually. And my parents, or Hollowbrook, might keep coming. They might find another loophole. They might sue me. If I triggered the poison pill. I put the money in a vault. Ravelin couldn't touch it. Hollowbrook couldn't touch it. My parents couldn't touch it. But neither could I. I would be safe, but I would be controlled. What should I do? I asked Nolan. Nolan sighed. Legally? The poison pill is the safest play. It kills the fraud scheme instantly. Kestrel Ridge has to transfer the assets by law. Ravelin loses. Your parents lose. But personally, it feels like a defeat. You lose your freedom. I thought about the last 3 days. The panic, the hacking, the fear of the special handling queue. I thought about Mark's desperation and Ravelin's reach. I want safety, I said quietly. I have spent my whole life being afraid of their chaos. I want the money to be somewhere they can never, ever reach, even if it means I have to ask permission to spend it for a while. Are you sure? Nolan asked. I am sure. I said, trigger the clause, included in our motion for Monday. We are asking the judge to activate the protective trustee transfer. Nolan nodded solemnly. Done. Saturday passed in a blur of preparation. Sunday came. The hearing was 24 hours away. I was at home, organizing my binder for the 10th time. My apartment was quiet. I had disconnected the doorbell. I had my phone on silent, except for Nolan's number. But when the voicemail icon popped up, it wasn't from Nolan. It was a number I didn't know. Area code 212. New York. I pressed play. The voice was male, smooth, calm. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a business transaction. Ms. Simmons, this is a courtesy call. We understand you are pursuing a protective transfer of the trust assets. That is a clever move. But before you walk into court tomorrow, you should reread Article 12. You are not the only beneficiary. If you lock the trust down, you might trigger the contingency. We would hate for you to lose everything by trying to save it. Click. I sat there, frozen. You are not the only beneficiary. I grabbed the trust document from my binder. My hands were shaking. I turned to Article 12. I had skimmed it before. It was the section on termination of trust. I read it line by line. Upon the death of the primary beneficiary, no. Upon the exhaustion of funds, no. Then I found it. Section D. Contingent beneficiary designation. In the event that the primary beneficiary is deemed to have actively acted against the interests of the trust, or if the trust is subjected to a protective restriction period exceeding 12 months, my heart stopped. Then 20% of the distributable income shall be reallocated to the contingent beneficiary for the duration of the restriction. I hadn't seen it. Nolan hadn't seen it. It was buried in a paragraph about tax liabilities. If I triggered the poison pill, the protective restriction period, I wasn't just locking the money up. I was triggering a payout. But who was the contingent beneficiary? The name wasn't listed in the main document. It referenced as Schedule B. I tore through the papers in the archive box. Schedule A. Schedule C. Where was Schedule B? I found it stapled to the back of a tax return from 2015. Schedule B. Contingent beneficiary designation. I looked at the name. It wasn't my parents'. It wasn't Ravelin. It was a name I had never seen before. Elias Vane. I stared at the name. Elias Vane. Who was Elias Vane? And why did my grandfather leave him 20% of the income if I got locked out? The voicemail made sense now. We would hate for you to lose everything. Someone knew about Elias Vane. Someone knew about the poison pill. Someone was watching me play checkers while they were playing three-dimensional chess. I called Nolan. Nolan, I said, my voice tight. We missed something. There is a Schedule B. There is another beneficiary. What? Nolan asked. Who? Elias Vane. I said, and the voicemail I just got, they said if I trigger the protection. He gets paid. Nolan was silent for a moment. Ellie, he said slowly, this is not just a family dispute anymore. If there is a named contingent beneficiary that we did not know about, this trust was never just about you. It was a holding tank for something else. I looked at the name again. Elias Vane. The name sounded old. It sounded heavy. I am coming to your office, I said. We have 12 hours before court. We need to find out who this man is. Because if I walk into that courtroom and trigger the poison pill, I might be handing a stranger the keys to the kingdom. I grabbed my keys and the binder. I thought I was fighting for my inheritance. I realized now I was fighting a ghost story. My grandfather had secrets, and one of them was about to walk into the light. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. A windowless chamber smelling of floor wax and old wood. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Nolan Price, my hands folded on top of the binder that had become my lifeline. My parents, Mark and Denise, sat at the defense table. They looked small, huddled together like children waiting to be scolded. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Gentry, who wore a suit that was slightly too shiny, was whispering furiously to them. Judge Holloway entered. She was a stern woman with reading glasses on a chain. She did not look like she had patience for family drama. Nolan stood up. He did not shout. He did not pace. He simply laid out the paper trail like a map of a crime scene. Your Honor, he began, his voice calm and resonant. We are here to prevent a fraudulent conversion of assets. The evidence will show a coordinated effort to strip Miss Simmons of her rights through forgery, deceit, and procedural manipulation. He presented the exhibits one by one. The notarization record from Northgate Heights, stamped on a day I was verified to be 20 miles away. The letter from the Harbor Point Neurobehavioral Center, a clinic that existed only as a mailbox in a strip mall. The internal logs from Kestrel Ridge showing the fraud alerts were not just ignored, but actively diverted. Then, he showed the transfer attempt. This request, Nolan said, holding up the transaction log, was not to move funds to a safe family account for management. It was a wire instruction to Hollowbrook Capital Partners, a distressed debt purchaser. This was not about caregiving, Your Honor. This was a robbery in progress. I was called to the stand. I walked up the short steps to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I looked at my parents. Mark refused to meet my eyes. Denise was weeping silently into a tissue. Ms. Simmons? Nolan asked. Can you describe the events of January 26th? I sat up straight. I remembered Nolan's advice. Facts, dates, documents. I opened my banking app at 8 in the morning to pay a utility bill. I said, my voice steady. The screen displayed an access denied message. I was informed that password reset limits had been exceeded. I had not initiated any resets. I described the call to the bank, the visit to the branch, the phone call from my parents where Mark slipped up. He told me the trustee would do what is best. I said he knew details about the trust administration that I had not shared with him. He knew because he had initiated the incapacity claim. Mr. Gentry stood up for cross-examination. He tried to smile, but it looked predatory. Miss Simmons, he said, you have had a stressful year, haven't you? Job pressure? Distance from your family? I have a stable job and I live quietly. I said, your parents were worried about you. He continued, they received reports that you were making erratic financial decisions. Is it not possible that their actions, however clumsy, were a good faith concern for your stability? They wanted to protect the family legacy. There is no family legacy to protect if they wire it to a loan shark. I said coldly, and forging a doctor's note is not a good faith concern. It is a crime. Mr. Gentry paused, clearly not expecting me to be so sharp. He tried to paint me as overwhelmed, as a daughter being manipulated by a predatory lawyer. But I kept pointing back to the binder, the dates, the signatures, the lies. Then came the final blow. Nolan called a representative from Kestrel Ridge's internal audit department. A woman named Ms. Cheng took the stand. She looked terrified. Clutching a folder, Ms. Cheng, Nolan said, did your investigation reveal how the fraud alerts on Ms. Simmons' account were handled? Yes, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The system generated 3 separate high-priority fraud flags. Under normal protocol, these would freeze the account and notify the beneficiary. And what happened? They were manually rerouted, she said. A user with senior administrative privileges tagged the file for special handling. This moved the alerts to a silent queue that bypasses the standard fraud desk. And do you know who authorized that tag? Nolan asked. Ms. Chung hesitated. We are still investigating the specific user ID, but the command originated from a terminal associated with our regional satellite office, the same office that processes referrals from Ravelin Harbor Advisory. The courtroom went silent. The judge looked over her glasses at the defense table. Mark had gone pale gray. Judge Holloway cleared her throat. I have heard enough, she said. She did not wait for closing arguments. She looked at the papers in front of her. The evidence of procedural misconduct is overwhelming. She ruled. The incapacity concern form is rejected as fraudulent. The application for an administrative delegate is denied with prejudice. She looked at my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Simmons. You are lucky that this is a civil hearing for a protective order and not a criminal arraignment, although I suspect that may be coming. You are hereby restrained from any contact with the Simmons Legacy Trust or the beneficiary regarding financial matters. Then she turned to me. Ms. Simmons, your counsel has requested the activation of the Protective Trustee Transfer Clause. Do you understand the implications of this request? I stood up. Yes, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Very well. The court orders that the domicile of the Simmons Legacy Trust be immediately transferred to Cedar Vale Fiduciary. The assets are to be secured under the terms of the protective restriction period. She banged the gavel. It was over. I had won. But as I walked out of the courtroom, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt heavy. By triggering the transfer, I had activated the poison pill. For the next 2 years, Cedar Vale Fiduciary would hold my money. If I wanted to buy a car, I had to ask them. If I wanted to move apartments, I had to submit a budget. I had saved the money from my parents, but I had locked myself in a cage to do it. Safety over freedom, that was the choice I had made. I walked down the marble steps of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Nolan was behind me, packing up his briefcase. Ellie! I turned. Denise was running after me. Her eyes were swollen, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. Mark was nowhere to be seen. He had likely retreated to the parking lot to call Ravelin. Mom, I said, stopping. Do not make a scene. The judge just issued a restraining order. I know. She gasped, catching her breath. I know. I am not asking for money. I need to tell you something before it is too late. She looked around, terrified, as if she expected someone to jump out from behind the pillars. Mark lied to you, she whispered. He lied to me too. But I found an email thread last night. I went through his computer while he was sleeping. What email? I asked. It was to Hollowbrook. She said, to the partners. He signed a side agreement. Ellie. A side agreement? He promised them that if he could not get the money directly, if the trust got locked down, there was a back door. My stomach turned over. What back door? He told them about the contingency, she said. He told them that if you were restricted, a third party gets a payout. He promised Hollowbrook that he could control that third party. He told them that is how they would get paid. I stared at her. The voicemail. You are not the only beneficiary. Who is the third party? Mom? I asked. Who is Elias Vane? Denise blinked. Elias Vane? I do not know that name. Mark just called him the asset. He said the asset was ready to receive the funds. She grabbed my arm. He deleted the emails. Ellie. But I took pictures of the screen with my phone. I have them. Send them to me. I said, right now. She nodded frantically, fumbling for her phone. I am sorry. Ellie, I am so sorry. I watched the photos load on my screen, grainy images of an Outlook inbox. I saw the subject line. Contingency Activation Protocol. I turned and walked away. I couldn't look at her anymore. She was trying to save herself now, throwing scraps of truth at me to ease her conscience. I drove home in silence. The city felt hostile. Every car behind me looked like it was following me. Every phone notification made me jump. I got into my apartment and locked the door. I threw the keys on the table and sat down at my laptop. I plugged in my YubiKey security stick. The little green light blinked. I logged into the Kestrel Ridge portal one last time before the transfer to Cedar Vale took effect. The dashboard loaded. The red access denied banner was gone. My balance was there. $480,000. But there was a new alert in the message center. A yellow triangle. Status update? Contingent beneficiary contact. Update request. Pending review. I clicked on it. A request has been submitted to update the routing instructions for the contingent beneficiary distributions, effective upon the commencement of the protective restriction period. Request submitted by Legal Representative for E. Vane. It was happening. The poison pill I had just swallowed to save myself was the trigger they had been waiting for. By locking myself out, I had unlocked the door for Elias Vane. The trust document said the contingent beneficiary got 20% of the income during a restriction period. 20% of the income wasn't the whole principal, but it was a stream of cash. And if Mark had promised that stream to Hollowbrook... My phone rang. It was Nolan. We have a problem, I said. Picking up. I know, Nolan said. I just saw the alert on the legal dashboard. Who is Vane? I do not know. I said, but my mother told me Mark has a side deal. He promised Hollowbrook they would get paid through a contingency. Nolan was silent for a moment. Ellie, he said, if Mark knew about the poison pill, if Ravelin knew, then they played us. They pushed us to trigger the restriction. They knew we would run for safety, and by running for safety, we activated the payout clause. They herded me. I whispered. They made me so scared I locked myself up. And now the money starts flowing to this Vane character, Nolan said. And if Vane is a shell for Hollowbrook, they get their pound of flesh. We have to stop it. I said, we can't stop a valid trust clause. Nolan said, not without proof that Elias Vane is a fraudulent entity. And right now, he is just a name on a schedule from 1995. Then we find out who he is, I said, and we burn the whole thing down. What do you mean? I am done playing defense. Nolan, I am done filing restraining orders and hiding in my apartment. I want to go on the offensive. I took a breath. The fear was still there, but it had hardened into something else, something cold and sharp. I authorize you to initiate a broader civil action. I said, I want to sue Mark Simmons, Denise Simmons, Ravelin Harbor Advisory, and Hollowbrook Capital Partners for conspiracy to commit fraud and RICO violations. Ellie, Nolan said, his voice warning, that is a nuclear option. You will be dragging your family's dirty laundry into open court. It will be in the papers. It will destroy your parents' reputation permanently. They will never recover. And Hollowbrook, these are dangerous people. If you sue them, they will come after you with everything they have. Let them come. I said, I want a forensic accounting review. I continued, I want to subpoena Ravelin's books. I want to know exactly where the money goes. I want to know who Elias Vane is. I want to tear the roof off this house and let the light in. Are you sure? Nolan asked. There is no going back from this. I looked at the binder on my desk. The timeline of lies, the years of gaslighting, the access denied screen that had started it all. I am not the one who started this war, I said, but I am going to be the one who finishes it. I clicked the mouse and took a screenshot of the new alert. I printed it and punched 3 holes in the paper. I opened the binder and snapped it into place. File it. Nolan, I said, file it tomorrow morning. I hung up the phone. The apartment was quiet. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights of Harbor Point. Somewhere out there, my parents were terrified. Somewhere out there, a man named Jim Ravelin was probably shredding documents. And somewhere, a ghost named Elias Vane was waiting for a check. I touched the glass. It was cold. I had chosen safety, and it had been a trap. Now, I was choosing war. I turned away from the window and went to the kitchen to make coffee. It was going to be a long night. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through betrayal, legal battles, and the fight for autonomy, and I hope Ellie's struggle resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment down below and tell me your city or country. If you enjoyed this series and want to see how Ellie takes the fight to Hollowbrook and uncovers the mystery of Elias Vane, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss a part. And finally, share your thoughts in English in the comments. What do you think Ellie should do next? Who do you think Elias Vane really is? I read every comment, and I can't wait to hear your theories. Stay safe, and see you in the next story.